To Face for the Newsfirst team. I'm Niresh Aliyatambi. My guest tonight is Swasthika Arulingam, attorney at law representing the People's Struggle Alliance, and she's here to talk about many things, including the focus on the local government elections, which are coming up very fast. Good evening, Swasthika. Welcome back.
Good evening, Niresh. Thank you for having me.
Right. So the People's Struggle Alliance, you ran a very vibrant campaign, both for the presidential election and for the general election. And now we have the third election coming up very quickly, which is local government. So what is your focus on when it comes to this election? Is it the same as the previous two elections?
In the parliamentary election, our campaign slogan was change the opposition, vote for a vibrant opposition. That was our campaign slogan. And what we promised people during parliamentary election was that whether we win the election or not, we would continue to remain a vocal opposition for whatever the government is going to do, because even at that time we were very practical and we realized that the NPP is going to win. And since the elections, we have been keeping to our promise, and we have been raising very serious issues. For instance, debt restructuring, the consequences of the IMF agreement, laws such as the Prevention of Terrorism Act. These are things which the opposition in parliament is not raising. As we can see, it's in shambles, the opposition in parliament. So as the People's Struggle Alliance, we have been doing, which is what we promised. In the local government elections, one of the good things about the local government elections is the local government is the closest structure to the people. It is the most closest government structure which people feel when they are governed by a local council. So during the local council election, what we are focusing on is the consequences of the economic structures which this government has continued from the Ranil Wickremesinghe era, and how that structures are impacting ordinary people in this country. So despite the fact that we seem to live in a sense of a facade of normalcy, on the ground people are struggling to eat, salaries are not enough, wages are not enough, cost of living is still too high for the people. So this is what we are focusing on, because this is what we see in our work, not only as the People's Struggle Alliance, but as trade unions, as people working, farmers and fishers and workers. This is what we see on a day-to-day basis. So that is what we are going to focus on in the local council elections.
Now, Swastika, you mentioned that you are disappointed in the performance of the opposition parties in parliament. Your party, of course, does not have any MPs in parliament, but could you elaborate a bit more on what's the problem with the opposition MPs from the many parties who are in parliament?
So I think a better phrasing would be, we kind of expected this to happen with the opposition we have right now. So I can't say I'm disappointed, because we kind of expected this. I think the problem is that the economic structure which this government is taking forward is the exact economic structure which Ranil Wickremesinghe put forward, which was in a sense supported by the main opposition party, Sajaba. This was supported by them. So when this government takes forward the exact same economic structure, there is nothing for the SJB or anyone in parliament to oppose. I mean, apart from SJB, the others do not take up economic issues, debate about it, and so on. So there is no debate. The government is doing exactly what Ranil Wickremesinghe did in terms of debt restructuring, in terms of the IMF package. So there is nothing to debate and there is nothing to confront. So because of that, there is no opposition. Opposition basically agrees with what the government is doing. So the parliament is going along as a whole, it's going along with whatever Ranil Wickremesinghe did, which is what this government is also doing. To give a very concrete example, is the EPF restructuring. Since the time it happened under the Ranil Wickremesinghe government, we have been raising as to the horrendous act of stealing people's savings. And the only reason Ranil Wickremesinghe government was able to do that is because EPF holders do not know what is happening to their EPF fund. That is the only reason he was able to carry it forward. Now this government is doing the same thing. But how can SJB oppose it when this debt restructuring was happening? They were in parliament as well. Of course, they were raising opposition and so on. but they were in parliament as well. So there is no difference in the economic ideology which is being proposed by this which is being practiced by this government, despite the fact that they say various things. They are practicing an economic ideology which was in fact put forward by the Ranil Wickremesinghe government. So there is, everyone agrees with everyone, so there is no opposition in parliament, but the repercussions of that, the implication of that is something which we are seeing on the ground, which I said, people are not eating. And I've been saying this for the last 2-3 years. I've been coming to various programs here. People are not eating. I think that for us is an indication of where the economy stands.
So at the tail end of the Ranil Wickremesinghe presidency, the statistics showed that nearly 7 million Sri Lankans were below the poverty line. That is the global benchmark poverty line, which is, I believe, $3 a day. Do you feel that this has not changed, or has it improved at all since the time of the elections?
I don't think the poverty line, I don't know the exact statistics, but when I look at what I see on the ground, and when we look at, for instance, the census report which talks about the falling rate of childbirth and so on, what we see is families are going under a lot of economic and financial stress, and because that, what we see is violence on the ground, violence against women on the ground. We have recently celebrated Women's Day, but when a country goes through an economic shock, one of the first casualties of that economic shock is women. We are seeing children born having stunted growth. We are seeing child mortality rate, which or children dying at during times of pregnancy, mothers being affected by giving a birth to children because they don't have proper nutrition and so on. So these are things which are a direct implication of the economic situation in this country. So when this government came to power with a 2/3 majority, we were hoping that they would provide a rapid transformation in terms of relief to the people, because that is what we need to revive the economy. But when we look at the budget which was presented and passed, when we look at the budget, more than half the revenue is going to debt restructuring. So this is precisely what we were warning. In a country which is coming out of an economic crisis where people don't have enough money to meet the day-to-day expenses, when a government spends more, or not spends, when the government estimates more than half of its revenue to be allocated for debt repayment, then this is exactly what we are saying. This is the problem with the debt restructuring which we have entered into. So where does that leave us? Where does that leave our health and our education and so on? This is the question which we have been raising.
Now, the health and education budgets have remained pretty much the same when you look at the GDP percentage. So what you're basically saying is that the restructuring, the debt restructuring has led to this situation where the government simply doesn't have money to invest in health, education and so on. Would that be correct?
The amount of money which they have allocated for debt repayment is staggering. It's more than half of the revenue. I think some economists say only 35% of our revenue is left for everything else.
But that is a situation which this government inherited from the last regime. So what could have been expected?
So this is exactly why when this government, during the election campaign, this government was promising that they would do debt restructuring, alternative debt sustainability analysis. The reason why they promised this is because they knew that the debt restructuring agreement which the Ranil Wickremesinghe government entered into just before the election was bad for this country. That is precisely why this government said we are going to do an alternative debt sustainability analysis. So what did we say? We didn't say anything which this government didn't already say, or this party didn't already say. We said go for a debt audit. And that is not only happening in Sri Lanka. Countries like Ecuador had called for a debt audit and saying that no, we can't pay this debt. So give us some time to really look into what is the kind of debt we are paying back. Are we paying back legitimate debt? Are we paying back ODS debt? Give us time to do debt audit. And actually no one questioned it. Even the IMF didn't question it, because that is something which people wanted, which the government were able to push for, and that actually happened there in Ecuador. So similarly, in Sri Lanka, we were asking at least go for a debt audit. Don't rush into the Ranil Wickremesinghe debt restructuring agreement. Go for a debt audit, which is something this government didn't do. And our analysis of why this government did not do is because it was listening to the wrong people. It was listening to people who have given money to the government, who have lent to the government. So they have a vested interest to get back the money. So they did not want a proper debt restructuring for the Sri Lankan people. They did not actually want a haircut. So who is not happy with this debt restructuring? The debtors are very, very happy with the debt restructuring agreement the government has entered into, because they are getting every single dollar back. It is the people who are affected, and this is exactly what we told this government when it came to power. Do not agree to the debt restructuring agreement which Ranil Wickremesinghe entered into. That was not a legitimate debt restructuring agreement, because Ranil Wickremesinghe did not have the mandate of the people. But you have the mandate of the people to relook at this arrangement between the Ranil government and the creditors. But this government refused to do that. And now we are seeing the implications of that. So I cannot accept and say this government did not have an option, this government did not have a choice. You have an executive president who has been voted by the people. Executive president. You have a 2/3 majority in parliament. When a government comes in with an executive presidency and a 2/3 majority in parliament and says, we didn't have a choice, they are questioning our democracy. They are questioning the sovereignty of the people. That is what they are doing. They are basically saying people don't have a say in the way this country is run. And that is a very, very dangerous statement to make when it comes to our country's democracy.
Now, let's look at what you said with regard to the EPF. And even when that deal was struck, there was a lot of criticism that it's a bad deal for the EPF, which has invested funds in government securities, and that obviously that will lead to a raw deal for the EPF members, who are the public. Everyone who works in an institution pays EPF, then the institutions pay EPF to the board.
Yeah.
And of course there's the ETF as well. So the basic premise was that the EPF should have got a better deal as the ISB holders and bilateral arrangements and all that, all those got better deals. Is that the general premise? And do you feel that that aspect, the EPF aspect, should have been revisited?
When the NPP government was in the opposition, and even when Mr. Chatura came to one of the programs, I raised this from him because I believe he was one of the petitioners. Right now, he's a member of he's an MP, he's a member of Parliament. So when they were in the opposition, when the NPP was in the opposition, they opposed the EPF restructuring and they filed petitions in the Supreme Court opposing the EPF restructuring. Now, one of the cases got dismissed, but 2 or 3 of the cases got moved on to early this year. So we were hoping with this new government coming to power, the people representing the central bank in court would come and say, the government has changed, our policies have changed, so we are relooking this EPF restructuring. So perhaps we should get a further date, or it's going to be on that premise. But surprisingly, this government did not have a change of position. It was the same position and the same restructuring which the previous government did, which this government is carrying forward. So if you think that was the right thing to do at now when you're in power, then why did you oppose it when you were in the opposition? Were you lying to people? Were you trying to be popular? Or were you trying to just resist it for the sake of resisting? And that is a very bad practice. It's a bad practice by opposition when you resist government actions for the sake of resisting. If you don't have an alternative, if you think there is no alternative, then don't resist it. We know of an alternative. We proposed an alternative. It is on that alternative that we as trade unions and as mass movements, we oppose the EPF restructuring, and it is on that alternative that we are opposing it now. The EPF fund did not just get a bad deal. It was singularly picked up from all of the other domestic debt we had, and it was the only fund which was subjected to debt restructuring. Banks were not subjected to restructuring, private bondholders were not subjected to restructuring. It was only the EPF fund which was picked up. And the reason why it was picked up, because the government at that time knew there would not be resistance from the EPF holders, because it's very hard to understand something like debt restructuring. So for the people to understand debt restructuring and the fact that they are actually going to lose 50% of the revenue at the time they retrieve the EPF money is not something which people visibly see. So because of that, they are not resisting it, publicly resisting it, and the government knew this. And that is the exact kind of thing which this government is also using. If you actually go and if the central bank goes and announces and says, because of this restructuring, you're going to lose 50% of our revenue, there would be a massive resistance from the workers, and the central bank that is exactly why the central bank is not saying that. So basically, Ranil Wickremesinghe government cheated the workers. This government is doing the same thing. There is no difference.
Now, the EPF and ETF have long been viewed as having been abused by successive governments. Yes. I mean, you can go back to the J.R. Jayawardena government in the 1980s, and then every government since then has used it and dipped into those funds for a variety of reasons, because those are massive funds, aren't they? And but at the same time, those funds belong to the millions of employees. If you take away the state sector employees, it's everybody else, isn't it? So do you feel that the EPF and ETF boards need to be better protected so that this doesn't happen in the future?
I think one of the interesting things about the EPF funds is that the central bank employees, their statutory funds are kept in a different account, right? So it's not amalgamated into the EPF fund. So these are people who are deciding on EPF funds while protecting their own funds. So I think rather than asking for a different kind of board and so on, central bank should be responsible for millions of, I think central bank should be responsible. Central bank must be accountable for the monies of the people. But the only way to make central bank and its employees accountable for the monies of the millions of workers is if they have a vested interest in the fund. So one of the things which we have been asking is, why have two different accounts? Why have two different EPF accounts? Amalgamate it together.
I mean, the central bank is full of holes. I mean, can you trust the central bank to do the right thing? Because we saw the bond scam, which, I mean, basically nothing got done in the end, because the former governor, the then governor of the central bank, remains at large. Even though warrants have been issued, he's happily in Singapore or wherever, and he's not coming back. At least, and Singapore is not going to send him at all. So the extradition has failed, and you don't see anything else going on, which is very strange again, because he doesn't have to be here. He can be tried in absentia, but that doesn't seem to be happening either. It's been a very long time, and the central bank itself doesn't seem to have learnt much from that scam. Can you actually place your faith in the central bank, whether it is independent or not?
I think the first people who would know something is going with the central bank is its employees. And that is precisely why I said, if you want to hold an institution accountable, touch on the money, touch on how the money is being handled. And that is precisely why they have had a separate EPF account for central bank employees. The moment you tie both these funds together, then it also becomes the concerns of central bank employees, also employees at the top level. So when something is going wrong, employees would raise alarm bells for all of us to know. Now here what is happening is, we are speaking from the outside. Central bank employees are not speaking, the central bank is not speaking, or people from the central bank are not speaking. And that is precisely why they were able to carry forward with this theft. But the moment you make employees accountable in some way, and the best way to do is to tie the money together. which is what I'm not saying that is a loophole, it is a tight kind of method, but that is the only method in which I see where these incidents like the bond scams and all don't happen in the future, where you tie money, because we have to always see where the money is. And in this case, EPF is disposable, while the central bank's pension funds are not. And that is precisely what we are questioning and saying, why should you have two different pension funds? You're also working for the government. The plantation workers also working for this state. They're also bringing revenue into this country. So tie both the funds together and protect it. And when something goes wrong there, then we are going to get alarm bells from inside the central bank, because now it is the money also of central bank employees. So that is one of the structures of accountability which we are proposing.
But once again, I must ask you about this point where now the central bank is, in my view at least, responsible for the economic debacle. What were they doing collectively while the country was sliding into bankruptcy? They may have issued a few soft warnings and a few reports and so on, but nobody from the central bank stood up and said, we're going to have to shut down the country. I mean, basically, until we ran out of first gas and then petrol and diesel, no one actually came out and said, this is what the impact will be, that the entire country, 22 million of us, are simply going to be sitting around and have no way to earn money, no way to get anywhere. That is the ultimate impact. And no one has really been held accountable for this. There is a Supreme Court judgment which faulted many people from the president on downwards, but they didn't actually, there was no punitive action against them on those grounds. So basically they got off scot-free. But the central bank is supposed to be the watchdog. And it was the central bank which was over the years issuing these ISBs and I mean everything from ISBs to printing money to doing all that. So they were in the position of authority to know what was going on. But can we continue to place our faith in this?
We should, you're absolutely
especially
right.
where the EPF funds are concerned.
When this EPF restructuring was happening, the person who created this structure of what we called the great theft was the central bank governor at that time, during Ranil Wickremesinghe's time, right, Mr. Nandalal. So he was the one who created this package. So he is, for the workers, he's a thief. And that is precisely why
he is not here to defend himself, so we have to be very clear about that.
We have met the central bank and we have told him to his face as well. So it is on that I'm making that comment here today. We have met him and we have told him that what he's doing is theft. What he's doing is robbing people. Of course, we did not get any response from the central bank for any of the questions which we raised from the central bank last year or year before. So he is still the central bank governor. So I completely agree. Central bank governors must be held. They also must be. But
I don't mean the governor, only the governor. The central bank is an enormous institution, and they are professionals. They are knowledgeable. It's not like it's not like any other government ministry or some Pradeshya Sabha where you get a bunch of people who may be only O-level qualified or even less. This is a professional institution.
We don't have a culture here of questioning authority. This is across the board. Very few people actually feel comfortable questioning authority because there is direct repercussions when you do that. In the past, when you questioned authority, you have been killed, you have been disappeared. So that has happened in the past. You will lose your job, you will be penalized, you will be sent on compulsory leave. So we have a history of people being penalized when they question authority. But at the same time, we also generally we don't have a culture of questioning authority. I think that comes from our schooling education. We have the teacher tells us something and we are supposed to listen, write it in our book and go home and then say that, write it down in our exams. So that culture, I think, starts from a very young age and then it continues right up throughout our life. So that could be one of the reasons why central bank employees are not, or the structure is not questioning. The reason I specifically mentioned the governor is a person who has been appointed for a particular period of time. He is ultimately the accountable structure to parliament to say something is going wrong. Just like when we elect someone to parliament, we don't, every staff who work under them, we can't hold them accountable individually, but we can hold the person we elected to power in parliament. Similarly, when for instance the Supreme Court judges are not doing or not giving proper judgments, we can hold them accountable because ultimately they are the higher tiers of the judiciary. So what I do is when I hold people accountable politically, when we hold people accountable, we as a practice we focus on people at the top tiers because they have the least amount of they have the most amount of power to question, to put people in place, to question authority, and they are the ones who don't do it the most in many occasions. So that is why I mentioned the central bank governor. It would be very nice if everyone inside the central bank, particularly as you said, central bank I think has the highest number of qualified economists in this country as one institution. I wish they would speak in public, risking their jobs, but I don't know, we don't have that culture in Sri Lanka, and I think it's when we do speak out against authority, we are penalized. I mean, most of us have gone through penalization because of what we have spoken and so on. So I think many people are not willing to do that.
And the end result with regard to the EPF and the restructuring of the debt is that the members of the EPF, the employees all around the country, would, when they retire and they expect a certain amount of money from the EPF, it would not be as much as it could be because the rate of interest that the EPF funds have received is less than what it could have been.
What they are supposed to get, yes. So they won't get what they're supposed to get when they're retiring. Economists say the revenue would fall by nearly 50% because of this restructuring which is happening. And of course, we had the currency fluctuations are happening as well. We are not a dollar economy, so to speak. We are functioning in rupees. So that also is going to impact the amount of money which people receive. So it's a huge...
So that's a significant amount, isn't it? Now, if you, for example, if you worked your entire life, let's say 40 years, 45 years, and then you may have a couple of million rupees at least waiting for you in the EPF account, your account, and then that 2 or 3 million rupees has not been receiving the amount of interest that it could have. I mean, that's the upshot.
That the other question is connected to that is, would this be acceptable if if one of us go and put a fixed deposit and they promise us a certain interest and then halfway down they don't give us that certain interest? I mean, that would not be acceptable for us. But this is considered acceptable when it comes to the EPF account. And as you said, when someone goes into retirement, this is like literally this is the only savings they would have, because in today's economy, no one is saving. Everyone is spending by the day. So at the end of the month, you don't have any savings as in cash. So EPF is going to be literally only savings when we go into retirement. So even that, if the government is going to take away the revenue, half of the revenue, it's what are we looking at in terms of the future? We are talking about a higher number of the demographic population being a elderly population. So this is going to be a social crisis when people retire and they don't have money to retire with.
And EPF members generally don't have pensions coming in like the state sector. So this is it. That's the last amount which they're going to get. and at that point they are 65 years or something close to that, so they are not going to get jobs either. Who's going to hire a person at the age of 65 unless you're a highly qualified consultant type of person? But generally the average person retires at 65 and really can't find much of a job after that, so they have to live off this money.
We in terms of older people being hired, we also see a lot of exploitation happening in factories. Some of the cleaners on the road are really elderly people, so they don't have a position to bargain for anything because they have already gone into retirement. So what we see in other countries is undocumented migrant workers being exploited by institutions. In Sri Lanka, we also see older people being exploited by institutions. So they go into retirement, then the institution hires them back. They don't pay proper wages, they don't pay any more statutory payments. So older people also get, when they go back into employment, particularly at the blue collar level, they get badly exploited because they don't have any bargaining power. So all of this is we are going to start seeing this in the future, because people won't actually have enough money to go into retirement to enjoy their the retirement period, because they won't have money in their hands. So they would go back into work, and when they go back into work, they're going to get badly exploited.
So your point of view, I assume, is that the NPP government needs to take a stronger stance for the people with regard to the EPF and other welfare measures.
The NPP government has a strong mandate to take radical steps. Unfortunately, once they came into power, I feel they're more interested to keep power under any circumstances rather than to implement the radical change which people wanted. People did not give a small mandate, they gave a 2/3 mandate, which is a radical mandate. But this government does not seem to be capable of implementing that radical mandate which was given by the people. People have given it 2/3. 2/3 in parliament, literally you can do anything. I mean, everything is in the reach of your hands, and you're not using it. So people have been radical in terms of change they wanted, which they voted for NPP. But I don't think the NPP government is a political party which is capable of implementing that change.
We are in conversation with Swasthika Arulingam, representing the People's Struggle Alliance. We're going to take a short commercial break right now. Don't go away, we'll be right back.
This is my complete my lust.
My dear friends, here we are, all in our true colors.
Prefect, coming soon on TV1.
Every day, millions face the impossible. What happens when clean water feels out of reach? When an entire village is left helpless? When it seemed like no one is listening, Gammatha saw the need. Gammatha took action and a community fought back. A water purification system for a village that once had none. Gammatha, for the people, by the people.
Welcome back to Face to Face. I am with Swasthika Arulingam, representing the People's Struggle Alliance. Now, Swasthika, we spoke a lot about the NPP government and the current situation, but now let's focus on the local government election. This would be the last election, in all probability, for another 4.5 years, unless the government goes ahead with the provincial council elections, but we don't hear much talk about that. So this would be either the last one or just one before the last. So this is where the people can express their views. What do you expect the people will say this time? Now, last time it was 62% for the NPP, but since then it's been, well, 4 months already. Probably another 2 months or a month and a half to go before the election. So about 6 months. What do you think the people's opinion will be after this 6-month period?
Right now, I think there are various things which have happened which have made people very uncomfortable with this government. For instance, the rice issue. The fishery issue, when President Ranil Wickremesinghe went to India and agreed with Narendra Modi that the fisheries issue is a humanitarian issue rather than an issue of aggression. So these are things which people are talking about, how the rice prices were decided even under this government, the fisheries issue, the PTA, when you speak about the North, the Prevention of Terrorism Act, the government is now saying we won't repeat it. So these are causing certain discomfort even among circles which have voted for this government. Whether people are going to think that yes, we gave the president and the parliament, now we have to give the local council because we want this government to do something or not, is something which we have to wait for the elections, because the parliamentary elections, this amount of victory was unexpected by any of us. So I don't want to prejudge anything before the elections, but definitely popularity has been shaking because of, not because of anything else, because of certain decisions which this government took. So local council election would be a testing point to see if the NPP government would sweep across all districts, or whether there would be certain kind of falling popularity in certain districts. And as the People's Struggle Alliance, we are putting candidates in certain local councils, not all of it, and we are trying to see if we can also form part of the local council. We are contesting in some local councils.
So are you focused mainly on the industrial areas, which is Western Province and Southern Province? So where will the People's Struggle Alliance actually be focusing on?
We are contesting in certain councils in all districts.
All districts, all 25.
All districts. But we are focusing on areas which we have worked, which we have done substantial work, where people know us and so on. So that is the area which we are putting our focus on and trying to win seats in the local council.
Interesting. And do you feel that where women's issues are concerned, women's representation rather, the local councils would be a game changer? Because according to the law, 25% of seats on the each local council is guaranteed for women, and there is also a guarantee for youth, which is under 35, I believe.
So when the last local council nomination was called, I remember many women coming and telling me, just before the final date of that, you have to hand over nominations.
This was in 2023.
Yes. Parties would call and they would ask, can you, like, they won't know anything about that particular woman, but because she's a woman, they would try to put in that name, because otherwise they can't submit the nomination papers. So in a sense, what traditional political parties try to do was, even this quota system, they try to, kind of maneuver along the lines. They would choose women who won't question authority and things like that. But within that patriarchal, maneuvering, you still found very strong women. Even in the last local council, you found very strong vocal women getting into local council and vocally speaking out about certain issues, including male domination inside their own parties. So local council has become a place where, because of this guaranteed quota system, despite the fact that male dominated parties have been trying to push back women from coming and taking places and so on, women have pushed back and claimed their spaces inside local council. So I think out of the three governance structures, the president, the parliament and the local council, I think the local council is most favorable for women. But recently we had a meeting at the election commission's office, And there were women local council who are hoping to contest for this time's local council, and they came and raised a very important point. Under the election laws, you can't go and do door-to-door campaigning because that's illegal. What the women were saying is that we don't have large amounts of money like status quo parties, like status quo politicians. So the only way we are going to reach out to people is if we go and speak to them house to house. Otherwise, there's no other way we can reach out to people. So this was a very, very vibrant debate which was happening inside the local council on the nature of elections and the nature of election campaigns, which tend to favor the financially powerful, tend to favor the elite, the status quo, because the status quo and the elite and the financially powerful don't have to go house to house because they have enough money to pay for advertisements, they have enough money to call for large meetings and so on. So it is the smaller groups which get affected when you have structures like this. So what is interesting about women coming together and raising this question from the election commission is women are not only coming to fill certain quotas, they are also questioning certain inherent power structures inside the election model, inside the democratic structures we have in Sri Lanka. So I was also in that meeting at the election commission, and it was a feel good moment where you found women arguing with officials of the election commission, raising questions about the nature of our democracy and so on. So it was a good moment.
Now, where house-to-house campaigning is concerned, that's the traditional method, not just in Sri Lanka, but in democracies around the world. That's been it. Long before there was social media or even the telephone was invented, democracy was there in many countries, and that's the way, town hall meetings, house to house, those are the traditional methods. And also house to house campaigning allows the public, the voters, to give their views to the candidates. I mean, I certainly do. When they show up at my house, I give them a earful because I ask them, what have you done as a councillor for the last 5 years or whatever, and they have to tell me their achievements, and then I give them a earful about what the area actually needs and why wasn't it done. So and then I also question, where were they? I haven't seen them since the last election. So where have they been? So these are it's the people's method of giving their views to the candidates. So definitely house to house.
Election laws must be changed. I don't think it should be made illegal to have house to house campaign, because as you said, that is when the person who is seeking the vote and the voter is coming in direct contact with each other. And I think it's good for democracy to have candidates coming to the houses and people, as you said, people holding them accountable. Where have you been all this time? I think that's a good model of accountability. So I hope this was raised in the election commission that day. I hope that the government and the parliament takes this question into consideration and change election laws, because I think it's very elite when you say that you can't go house to house, because the people who will go house to house is the people who have to go house to house in order to do campaigning, and that is the ground level candidates.
But now the People's Struggle Alliance, what is your strategy? How are you going to get your message out to the voters?
So because as the People's Struggle Alliance, parliamentary and the presidential election were the first election in terms of the alliance, and we did not get enough votes to even secure one seat in the parliamentary election. But interestingly, since the parliamentary election, when there is a struggle, when people want to raise some issue, when they want to raise some concerns, the People's Struggle Alliance and the members are the ones who people would invite to speak about those issues. Since the elections, we have been holding several public meetings speaking about structural issues which no one else is raising in parliament. So it's this interesting dichotomy where we did not get enough votes to even secure one seat, but people are seeing us as people who would raise concerns on behalf of the people. So I don't know whether this dichotomy is going to change during the local council elections or not. But we are preparing for the local council election. We are trying to put very strong candidates, and we are trying to secure some seats. We will see whether our luck has changed with the local. It has to be, we have to wait and see. But one of the things which we did during the parliament election is we raised certain concerns, and those concerns remain valid to date. And I think that is the reason why people are in touch with us, because we did not change our stance simply because we wanted to get to power. And I think there is a credibility to that kind of politics to date in Sri Lanka.
Now, you mentioned something very interesting about our aging population. And there are many reasons for this, but one reason is that many young people tend to go overseas, to migrate or to go for work. And they stay out there for not just 2 or 3 years, but 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And that's mainly because there are very few opportunities here in Sri Lanka. So it all leads back to job creation, doesn't it? Now, from the point of view of your party, where should the job creation come? In which sector, given Sri Lanka's present economic situation?
So 2-3 sectors which can be developed, which has not been developed. One is the service sector, which we are very strong on actually. We have, for instance, we do have IT professionals who don't have jobs, proper jobs here, so they are going abroad. But at the same time, the manufacturing sector, which is still very rudimentary, I would say. I mean, when we speak to experts on this, they would say the manufacturing sector in Sri Lanka has not been developed due to various reasons. Maybe due to the way our local capitalists are investing in the manufacturing sector, maybe due to the fact that the state has not created a proper policy, a manufacturing policy, and so on. So these are two areas. If you see the trajectory of any developing countries or developed countries, they would have focused on these two sectors, including, for instance, India and China. So I think these are the areas in which we can focus on. One of the areas which we should not be focusing on or should not be doing is, a finance economy, where finance companies and banks, they do this speculating kind of economy, which ultimately results in huge economic crashes, like what we saw in the housing crash in the United States. So these are issues which industrialists, economy should focus on, and in terms of creating economic policy or job creation policy for our country. But at the local council election level, we don't talk about larger structures. We speak about what is happening in the village, what is happening in the town, what is happening in a certain division. That is what we are talking about, what touches people on a day-to-day basis. So what we do is we take economic ideas and economic structures which have succeeded in other countries, and we connect it to day-to-day experiences of people. And we try to create a certain sense of agency and autonomy when we speak to people. That is what we are trying to do in the local council election, including encouraging women who have already been very active within the community. They might not have thought of large political ideas or anything, but they have been very active members of the community, and some of them are now working with us and will be contesting with us. So we see that as a positive sign.
Now, we are almost out of time, so my final question to you is, much of the country's industrial output is in the western province, Colombo, Kalutara, Gampaha districts. Those are the main areas, and these are the areas where you get so many municipal councils and urban councils. What needs to be done by these councils to make the western province in particular a better place for the workers, including job creation?
One of the things which have been happening, particularly got accelerated after the end of the war, is gentrification of urban areas, where you found overnight slums being demolished, and supposedly they were given houses in the peripheries of the city and so on. The city is not a place where ordinary people can come and occupy. Of course, they come for jobs, various jobs and so on, then they have to leave back to the peripheries of the city. For me and for the People's Struggle Alliance, cities must be a place where people who come to work here can occupy, can live, can even build a family if they want to. And if we want to have that, we need to have affordable housing, we need to have affordable transport, we need to have proper sanitation facilities inside the, how many proper washrooms we have in the city. I mean, would any of us use public toilets in the cities of this country? So these are areas, housing, transport, sanitation, and clean places, clean and affordable places to get food is 4 things which we focused on during the parliamentary election. We will also be focusing on in the local council elections as well. This is something which we would fight for, which we would find the money for allocation. Because the problem, I'll go back to the structural question again. The problem with our budget is not that we were unable to find money. We asked the wrong questions, we did the wrong things, we continued with the wrong economic structures, and now we're expecting some magic to happen and money to come. So this is, once again, it's not only the economy, it's also tied to politics, what kind of politics we do. So during local council elections also, we would be focusing on these topics. We would be speaking to people. There are certain areas where people are also concerned about environmental issues, so we are working with them on those issues as well. So we are touching people on areas which they have already worked on, which they want political support, and we are providing that political support.
And one last question, especially as you are so active in the area of women's issues, safety and security. We see all these drug wars going on, and it's not the fault of this government or the last government. It's been successive governments have pandered to
Yes.
The narcotics, the underworld and the narcotics, and now we see all these murders happening, shootouts, executions going on. Every week we seem to have a couple, and it's basically led to a situation where law and order is, I wouldn't say we don't have law and order, but it creates a feeling of unease. You want to get home safe. Of course, so far innocent civilians haven't got caught up in it to a great extent, but at the same time one doesn't quite feel safe walking on the street at night and so on. It's not that anyone's going to come up and shoot you, but it's this feeling that safety is not where it should be. What would be your solution to make our streets and neighborhoods safer?
So I want to speak about perhaps quickly about 3 things. One is, if you want to find women safe in public spaces, you have to invest. If 90% of women are subjected to harassment in public transport, the only way we are going to counter it if you put more buses on the road, more public transport, more trains, more buses, so that women don't have to travel in crowded public transport, and also have public transport during late hours, so women don't have to wait for hours on the street. That is when violence happens and so on. So investing in public transport, there is no shortcut to it. You have to invest in public transport. So that is one thing. Second thing is, in terms of the shooting incidents which have been happening, despite the fact that we feel as if we are safe because drug or people who are connected with narcotics are getting shot at and killed and so on. This is where it starts. It starts with people who can be disposed of, getting disposed of, and then that culture slowly seeps into society. So we should start questioning, even at this point when a so-called person who has been involved in drug trafficking and all getting shot in a courtroom. We should question that as well, because that is the culture which later seeps into society and starts, suddenly we start seeing shootout incidents of various people getting knocked off and so on. So it does not matter who gets extrajudicially killed, who gets illegally killed, we must question it. And if we don't question it, we are putting all of our safety at risk. So that's the second thing. The third thing in terms of drugs is that when we go and speak to people in rural areas, in workers for instance, many people, many young people are taking narcotics. Ice, for instance, they are taking, and courts, magistrates' courts are filled with cases where people have been caught with small amount of narcotics and so on. Economic crisis and bad economic structures, and when people don't have enough money to look after their day-to-day lives, this issue of people becoming dependent on drugs so that they can work long hours becomes an issue in any country. For instance, trishaw drivers are working late hours, and many are falling asleep while they are on the job. So not only are they putting pedestrians in danger, they're putting their own lives in danger, but they don't have an option because they have to earn to live a life. So if you want narcotics, the problem to go down, economic structures have to be corrected, and if economic structures have to be corrected, we also have to look at a radically different macroeconomic structure, which this government so far has not done.
And I'm afraid that's all the time we have for you this evening. My thanks to Swasthika Arulingam, attorney at law representing the People's Struggle Alliance. Thank you very much for being with us once again, Swasthika.
Thank you, Niresh.
And don't go away because the news is coming up next. Have a great evening.